You are listening to audio from the Decidedly podcast. For more information, find us on Instagram at Decidedly Podcast.
When I first got my blue belt in jiu-jitsu, I went to a competition and I'm ready to go compete for the very first time at blue belt. Now, in jiu-jitsu, blue belt is like level 2, right? It's the first belt that you earn beyond the white belt, which you don't earn, you are simply given. I show up to the mat. My friend Theron says, "Oh, you know who you're going against?" No. He goes, "You're going against so-and-so from California. He's ranked 5 in the world." I go, "Oh, gee, thank you for telling me that. Thank you for ruining this experience for me. Now I know I'm going to get my butt kicked." And I went out there and I got my butt kicked worse than I ever had before and worse than I ever had since. I think I lost 27-0, which for those of you that understand the jiu-jitsu scoring system, recognize that that's really hard to do. It's really hard to lose that bad. I would have felt better about getting choked or get my arm bit behind my back within, first few seconds than getting 27 points scored on me. 5 years later, I go compete at a higher level at purple belt. And I show up to the mat and my friend Theron is there and he says, "Oh, do you know who you're competing against?" I said, "Oh my gosh," rolled my eyes. "I know how it went last time he did this." I go, "No." He goes, "You're competing from so-and-so from Brazil. He's number 1 in the world." And what would have shocked the version of me 5 years in the past is that I went out there and I beat this guy submission within 60 seconds. And it's not because I'm so good at jiu-jitsu. It's not because I learned some special technique. It's because I changed the way that I think about the match. I certainly haven't mastered it. If I had mastered my mindset when it comes to jiu-jitsu, I would maybe be known more for my jiu-jitsu than for this podcast or my business or wealth management. But it got me really interested in combat sports psychology, sports psychology, and ultimately this way of thinking that was inspired by my own coaches led me to Mindset Mike, our guest today. Mike Moor is a former FBI crisis negotiator with 7 years of experience, a mindset coach to top athletes and businesses through his company, The Unfair Advantage. He's a seasoned wrestling coach as well with 19 years of experience. He was a 3-time NCAA Championship Coach and former NCAA Division I wrestler. He has an impressive track record of nurturing talent. He's got over 100 state placers, 50 plus All-Americans, 9 national champions, and he's helped high-level athletes, teams, and businesses transform their mindset over the past 10 years. He's worked with UFC champions and professional athletes of all different sports. We got into it today and talked about a lot of the work that he's done in the UFC. If you're an MMA fan, you'll recognize all of these names. If you're not an MMA fan, then you may have trouble keeping up with some of the who's who of what we talked about. But we talked about some concepts that are applicable to your life, whether you're a fan of the UFC or not. We talked about recognizing and improving your mindset status, finding and attracting your ideal client, managing your ego, outlining clear boundaries for who and what receives the energy that you put out, and then doing an alignment audit, figuring out what matters to you, why it matters to you, and measuring your input, not the results from it. So if you want to improve your mindset, there is no one better than Mindset Mike. Enjoy our conversation. I'm Sanger Smith, and this is Decidedly. Dude, I normally keep them covered, but I'm thrilled to have somebody on the show that makes my ears look good.
Yeah, right.
You're doing me a favor there, man.
why listen, it's always good to hang around people with cauliflower ears, where no matter where you got it, whether it's MMA, jiu-jitsu, or wrestling, we're still all cut from a similar cloth and suffered the same ear death.
Oh, yeah. You know what I get a lot is, do you box? And I didn't know that was a real problem with boxers. That's
it makes sense. I guess like the impact, like wrestling and jiu-jitsu is usually grinding over time, but I know that you can get cauliflower ear through a sudden impact because it's destruction of cartilage. So I'm gonna guess.
That's the layperson's point of view in my experiences. Oh, he's a boxer. I kind of get offended.
Yeah, no, we actually can't throw hands at all.
Yeah, no, I actually don't know anything about that. Dude, I first heard about you because Kevin Holland was getting ready for a fight, and he trains at Travis Luter's gym, which is where I train jiu-jitsu. Mm-hmm. And his coach, Justin, he's always shit-talking in the locker room until Kevin's fight's coming up, and then he's real positive because, Kevin's going to kick this guy's ass. He's always excited. This one fight, it must have been a year or two ago, and he goes, well, let me tell you why Kevin's going to kick this guy's ass, because we got Mindset Mike in our corner now. And then I started reading about what you were doing, and then I started to hear it's kind of like the yellow slug bug concept. You see it once, and then you see it everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
I started hearing everybody's talking about Mindset Mike all of a sudden. Like, dude, who the hell is this guy?
That's
so
me.
You have a fascinating story, man. You were a college wrestler, go to the FBI, and then now coach athletes, fighters, business owners on improving their mindset. I want to start at the beginning.
Sure. When
you were a wrestler, were you always, did you know that you wanted to pursue a career in it, not necessarily as a wrestler, but were you in love with it back then?
Yeah, I was always in love with wrestling. And actually, the reason that I chose to wrestle Division I was not as much for the fact that I wanted to be a Division I All-American or anything like that. I knew I always wanted to coach. And I knew that if I wrestled at a Division I school that was equitably good in the academics that I wanted, that would prepare me to do that. So I had planned on being in the FBI my whole life, and then running a wrestling club on the side. I was always passionate about sports psych, but in college, when I started really exploring that as an option, this was 2004 to 2008. So completely different generation and set of circumstances. Social media really didn't exist. So if you wanted to be in sports psych and do it at the level that I wanted to, you had to know somebody who knows somebody to like get into the Olympic Training Center or to a professional sports team. And similarly, I was interested in becoming like a physical therapist, but I didn't want to work on sedentary people. No offense to anyone that's sedentary. I wanted to work with just athletes. I wanted to be a detective, but I didn't want to be a cop first. Right. So, the path for me to do any of those things was not really what I wanted. So the FBI was why I went to school. That was my passion. I pursued a lot of like psych related things in school in the FBI. And then ultimately like coaching wrestling, running a club is what led me to do this now. So I was always passionate about it, would have liked a career in it, but it was never really an option.
So what were you like as a kid? The people that I know that go have a really successful military career, FBI, CIA, whatever, it seems like they all have the same story of, I always wanted to do this. That's how I knew it wasn't right for me, as I started talking to these guys. I go, I'm the only one that didn't always want to do this. Was that, when were you first thinking, hey, FBI is the way to go?
So I like the idea might have crossed my mind like as I was in high school, but September 11th, 2001 was really the day that I decided that I wanted to be in the FBI. I'm a New Yorker, so I was in Long Island at the time. You could see the smoke from the towers. They were calling kids out from class to tell them whose parents worked in the Trade Center. Two planes at the Trade Center. So I was going through like what did they call it? My statistics teacher was a great teacher. He did way more than statistics. He made us do like a career report, I don't know, some sort of research project on what career do you want for the rest of your life. We did like career aptitude tests, stuff like that. And law enforcement was like one of the options. It fit all the skill sets, but all I really thought of was like being a cop. And then all of a sudden I see Robert Mueller and Rudy Giuliani walking through Ground Zero. And I'm like, I want to be a part of that. I knew law enforcement was an option, but that's what I wanted to be a part of. So pretty much that's the day that I decided, like, I went back home, I did my research, and I'm like, federal law enforcement or like government intelligence was going to be the route I was going to take.
Yeah. Oh, I bet that was a tremendously impactful experience being in New York. Whenever you locked your eyes on that, when was wrestling part of a career path? When did that come into it?
It was always there. I've had nothing but great coaches throughout my time as a wrestler. So I always wanted to do what they did. I was kind of like a natural born leader. So I was in leadership roles, and one day wanted the opportunity to mentor my own people my own way, whether it's I had envisioned being a high school coach or like an assistant high school coach. Where I grew up, you didn't have to teach the coach. And then everywhere else I went, you had to teach the coach. So it was hard to be an assistant coach at high school. So I ended up starting my own club. So when I chose where to go to school, I chose where to go to school specifically because they produced more FBI agents than anybody in the country. And they had the wrestling program that I wanted. Not wrestling in college was an option. So I led with academics, but I needed like a wrestling component. And, when I went to the University of Maryland, that was realistically a really good fit for me.
Yeah. Did you envision at the time that your coaching career would be a prominent career choice, or was it, hey, this is more of like a hobby, a side gig to the FBI career?
Hobby, for sure. I thought it would be something I would do on my spare time that I was passionate about. And ultimately, as time went on in my FBI career, I became more and more disconnected to the reasons why I started. I was sticking around for the benefits. I was sticking around for the job security. Like, it was cool, but when I started, I was in a different position with different circumstances in DC. When I transferred to Houston, very different culture. I took a different position so I could coach and have a regular schedule. And just the nature of what it was in Houston made me realize that I am more passionate about pursuing a coaching career than I am wanting to stay here. My reasons to leave were greater than my reasons to stay. Took me about 2 years to pull the trigger, but ultimately I always thought this would be a hobby, and I was FBI for life.
Yeah. You're saying a lot of the things that our clients tell me when they're ready to move on from a business that when they started it, they thought was the best thing they could ever possibly do with their life. Or maybe they didn't even start. Maybe dad or mom started it. And, this is this is like my life calling. And then at some point, it's not that anymore. And that's okay. But when they run away from it, that's a problem. When they're moving to something that is much better and much more fulfilling and much more long lasting, that's when it's a great decision.
I agree. I think a lot of people lose sight of their why. The same thing happens in fighting. When I worked with Zhang Weili for a couple fights, her issue wasn't anything to do with fighting. There were some things after the losses to Rose and things like that that held her back, but that was really less compared to when ESPN interviewed me. I was saying she lost her love for fighting. She lost the reasons why she started. She lost the desire. So she has the skill, but what got her here isn't what's going to get her there. And falling in love with fighting again was that. So that's where she went from, having a knockout loss to a tough loss to being smiling and happy and murdering everybody.
That's what was so notable about her personality, is that she was always, especially in her last fight, smiling and just like she's thrilled to be there in the press conferences and the way. Yeah, like now it's just, that's what I think of when I think of Zhang Weili, is she is just thrilled. And that story seems really common in combat sports. For someone to get to a champion like she did, she's the champion of the UFC. You can't get better than that. And you kind of lose, life is a lot easier. It's not the grind that it was, when they first started on the amateur scene. How do you find the love again?
Well, I say that we have to be in alignment. If we want to achieve goals, you have to be in alignment. We have to know and be connected to why we're doing it, what we love about it, and how we can get better. People usually lack at least two of those, but at a minimum, it's one. So having a strong connection to like what I would say is your big why. Like, well, why do you fight? Because I love fighting. Well, why do you love fighting? Why is that important to you? Why is that important to you? Why is that important to you? That's more so your big why. So Nietzsche said, a man who knows his why can bear any how. So when your why is clear, how is easy, right? So during tough times, whether it be relationships, business, your sports career, whatever, what's more important, why you're frustrated or why you started this and wanted to continue to do this in the first place? So when that is clear, that's the most important, then you got to connect why you're doing it with what you love. We have an idea of what we like or love about our jobs and our sport. But when I ask people, so what do you love about fighting? What do you love about wrestling? They might have like an answer or two. That's not enough.
Yeah.
On a bad day, that's not enough. So it's, what do you love about training? What do you love about competing? What do you love about fight day? What do you love about fight week? What are the things about your sport in general that you really enjoy, that like bring you joy, that make you happy? Because like Wei Li, happy fighters are dangerous fighters. You cannot be happy if you are not fulfilled, and you can't be fulfilled unless you're doing something that you love and are deeply connected to why you're doing it.
A lot of what you're saying it sounds a lot like what I tell our clients. They're in a totally different world. They're not professional athletes. They're not fighting anybody ever, but they want to get better with their money. And usually that's why they come to me. So I want to make more money. I want my investment returns to be better. I want to be able to sell my company and know that I can retire, something along those lines. And that's what I lead with is, well, what's important about your money to you? What do you like about your company? What do you like about your life? Why do you have this company? And hardly anybody's first answer is even remotely close to what the truth is.
100%. And here's the thing is that everyone knows what they want, but they don't know why and how to get there, right? Like, that's why goal setting is very empty, right? Like, you could set a goal to save a certain amount of money, set a goal to be a UFC champion. Well, why you're going to get there is what's going to allow you to deal with the ups and the downs and taking a while to get to the UFC and, losing some fights, getting like really crappy judges' decisions. The other thing is that, especially in combat sports, very old school of like outwork everyone, like hard work will pay off. That is the biggest crock of shit for the top like 5%. Like, if you want to be just good at something, hard work matters. If you're on the regional scene, hard work matters. You want to make 6 figures, maybe even low 7 figures, hard work matters. When you're at the top 1%, which is the majority of the people that I work with, when you're a 1%er, it's not hard work, it's smart work. And that's where the how comes in. You can know why you want to do it. You can know what you love and what you want, but having a strategic how, like intentionally, measurably, that's regularly assessment oriented, that how is what gets you there. And it's no different for you, right? You don't look at something every quarter. You look at something every month, every couple of weeks, right? You're constantly evaluating. You don't say once a year, we're going to look at your books. Yeah,
absolutely. And for someone to get to the point where they're considering working with you, they're one of the best. And maybe, I'm guessing, a lot of them are going, holy crap, more bench presses isn't going to win me this next fight. more hard sparring rounds is not the answer. What do I do? And that's why they're even open to listening to your perspective. When you find these men and women that you coach that are stuck, how often are they aware of the problem within themselves in the way that you can articulate it? Because you and I can talk because we can see this problem really clearly. I find that my clients don't come to me saying, oh, well, I just don't understand my why. And that's what I want your help with.
Yeah. So I'll say a couple things. Well, so before I started this company called The Unfair Advantage, so I'll explain why it's called that. I was one of the directors in a large mental performance company that mainly catered to wrestling. So their niche market was really like high school teams, high school and middle school individuals, and some college. Now, I just was personally working with a lot of people out of that niche, which is ultimately what led me into this niche where like, I'm only going to work with these people. I'm not going to travel around the country, go to middle school events, high school events, so that I can pay the bills when all I want to and all I really work with are people winning NCAA championships and UFC titles. So people, I would say there's 3 tiers of people that approach mindset training in general. 90% of athletes, like most people, mindset is their Achilles heel. It is genuinely holding them back. The top 9% of people, those are people where mindset is at a struggle, but it could definitely be a competitive edge. So something where like I'm in the middle of the pack, like I want to jump levels. Hard work necessarily isn't it. I need to get more out of myself. The 1% level, and I would say like that's my niche, but I definitely spend time like in that top 5-10% level. But you know, I don't really work with many people that have problems. We all have things that we need to fix, but I work in that 5-10% level, focused on that 1% niche. The 1%ers, they don't really have an issue. Everyone's got stuff to work on. What they're looking is gasoline on a good fire. Like, what can I do? Let's take UFC. What could I do that everybody else isn't doing, where I can get more out of myself when I need it the most, and that's not going to pop me on a drug test? That's where I come in, right? Like 10 years ago, it was just take steroids, right? 10 years ago, it was start wrestling. Well, now all the wrestlers are in the UFC. All the Dagestanis are taking over, right? Like wrestling's been around. It's like, what can I possibly do to get the most out of, to perform my best when I need it the most? The unfair advantage, where does that come from? I felt like in my previous career, there came a point where our company sold our worksheets online, which is fine. A lot of people do that. I felt like, we gave the same training to everyone, which is fine. That's how you scale. But I had figured out some things on my own that had my clients winning consistently at a high level. And I don't want to share that with everyone. I don't want to work with everybody. And not because I only want to work with good people. I want to give you an advantage that feels unfair because the other people can't get it. Unless they worked with me, they can't get it. So that's why I want them to feel like you have an unfair advantage when you compete. Almost like it should be an NCAA violation for us to work together because your ability to compete is just so unfair.
If you can unlock, an additional performance boost that's all within my head, heck yeah, I'm up for it. But if it's on a YouTube video series, the guy across the map from me probably has it too.
Yeah, and listen, like my last company their stuff is very effective. I just found myself having to fill in a lot of holes for the higher level people. So I realized that my calling was doing this with higher level people. And on the exception that I don't work with, like a 1%, I'm helping them close the gap. So either we're trying to do damage control, we're trying to close the gap on good people, or we're at the top. And how do I widen the gap? How do I continue to show everyone how much farther apart they are from me? Yeah,
that does make sense. So what happened in your life where you realized that you had this unique ability and skill that other coaches didn't?
It's a great question. So I think I've always been a natural born leader. I've always been very outgoing. I was always leadership driven. That was always something I was good at, was bringing the best out of people on a casual level. Then when I opened up my wrestling academy, even in the FBI, like I was peer elected, unanimous to give the speech at our graduation. Like I was always that guy. So I knew I had this ability to lead, and coaching is obviously like such a servant leadership role where you get to help other people realize their potential. This really came to be when I was running a club in Houston. And the second year I ran the club, I had 13 kids in the state finals out of my club. 9 should have won, and 5 kind of shit the bed. And I was like, I don't understand how that happened. Like, physically prepared, mentally prepared, had all the right advice. They got great high school coaches too. There's no reason for them to have performed poorly. And then I realized that like everything else in our training was so systematic. But the reason they failed, which was here, I gave them good advice, but they didn't have a system, a process, and a set of tools to build, train, and execute mindset the way that we have a set of system, process, and tools to pass guard, get takedowns, hand fight, and get stronger. So I sought out my last company, Wrestling Mindset, as a client. I saw how much it helped. They saw how much I understood the material. I started coaching with them. And then I was one of the original 8 coaches. There's about 130 now. And in that time, when I started taking clients, I'm like, oh, I'm good at this. like, I'm really good at this. I don't even know what I'm doing, but my natural set of skills with a curriculum, like, I'm good at this. And then I started getting more and more results. I got access to more and more higher level people. I traveled, I learned. I was on 60 plus flights a year, like, doing all this stuff. And really, it was COVID where things took a turn for me. And during COVID, when I couldn't travel, I was like, well, I got to start coming up with, like, I've got all these ideas that I use with different teams circumstantially. I was like, I got to come up with like a systematic way to talk about the things that are different than what my company does, so that I can deliver this at scale. Since COVID, I'll give you some crazy stats. Since COVID, I've had 18 people be number one in the country or the world, 10 world championships as of this weekend, 2 UFC titles, Bellator title, I can name the others, 5 college national championships, including 3 NCAA titles from 2 teams in the last 3 years. I don't say any of that to brag. What I say that is I kind of figured out like the formula to what I need and the type of client that I need and what they need to know. And if I have the right fit of a client, they trust me 100%, they give me what they need. I can not guarantee that they win it all, but I can guarantee that like we're going to have very significant results, because I've had a long resume of teams go from 3-9 to 10-3, losing for 11 straight years to winning their first back-to-back national championship. I cracked the code.
What is it about someone's mindset before they start working with you that makes them a good candidate? Because I imagine you're even at the top 1%, you're turning some people down.
I turn a bunch of people down. Since I left my company, I've turned more people down in the last 4 months than I've turned down in like 7 years. And that's a really great question. I must say, you're asking, I've been on a lot of podcasts. These are really good questions. I appreciate it. What makes a good client? So Ashley Evans Smith asked this to me. And to paraphrase what I said, I need someone who's emotionally intelligent. So they have a general understanding of their thoughts and their feelings. You know, they're not a caveman, man or woman. I need someone who's coachable. I need someone who's willing to be vulnerable. The more vulnerable they are, the easier that it is, but they just can't have a brick wall up because it's not my job to knock it down. I would say last wall I had to knock down was Wei Li, and I was very incentivized to help her knock that wall down because she's Zhang Wei Li. You know, she was very rigid in the beginning, stone-faced, like poor answers. She didn't know much about emotions. She knew how to work hard. And now you see the difference. A happy fighter is a dangerous fighter. So emotional intelligence, vulnerability, they gotta trust me, and they have to be good at their sport. They don't have to be great, but they have to be proficient. It doesn't matter if you're a black belt, you have to be a proficient, skilled black belt. I don't care if you're a blue belt. You need to be a proficient, skilled blue belt. I try to like avoid barriers, like for individuals or teams that would hold us back. So like a poor culture, something like a culture that is like bred on entitlement. Not that it can't exist, but in order for me to be effective, I can't spend the entire first year doing damage control. So I'm willing to take on the challenge when it's correct, but that's essentially like what makes a great client for me. And if you know women, then you know that a high level woman fits like cookie cutter right into exactly what I said. So I tell people, like, I love working with anyone that's at a high level, who's coachable, that's willing to do all the things, but I can get a lot done with women in a short amount of time because of their level of emotional intelligence.
Yeah, in my experience, women are a lot more advice receptive. You know, I often have men come in and it's like, if you're willing to sit down with me, you're at least willing to admit that you might not know everything, right? Yeah. So like, at least we're somewhere. And I've found that women, I usually don't have to convince them to do what I recommend. I mean, once they trust me, they will go, well, whatever you say, we're going to do that. We're going to put that in place. Okay, we're going to get this done with the business, et cetera, et cetera. With men, I'll have some of them disagree with me. Sometimes it turns into a debate about a topic that I've studied my whole life that you just learned about 5 minutes ago. Or I'll have them, I'll even have men say, oh, yeah, and then just not do it. So I just don't see that with women. Women have, there's a lot of things that men have that benefit them that women struggle with. You know, men typically will be more, ask for what they want more directly. You know, they're able to go get what they have their eyes set on, where I'll see women are struggling with, I don't even feel good about wanting to want that. So it's a totally different mindset problem that I notice. But
for sure,
other than women, you know, who have the emotional intelligence and the vulnerability, they're advice receptive, what are some things that people say that tip you off where you go, no. You're going to be a problem for me?
People that make it seem that like, yeah, I've already done stuff like this, or, you know, like these are things that we already do. You know, like just a presence of an ego that is bigger than their desire to get better. Everything dies with the ego. You know, ego is the birth of entitlement. Ego allows causes wins to not feel so good and causes failure to feel awful. When you're just obsessed with getting better, then, you know, the wins and the losses are just part of the process, like leading to the end of the road. So I would say just like anything that shows like pride or ego. Someone can have pride or ego as long as they show that the willingness to want to sit it aside and like be able to take advice. But yeah, it's usually just along those lines, like pride, ego, and I'm sure you see this in money management. A $500 client will ask 6,500 questions. They'll be 3 weeks late to pay you, and then they won't be satisfied with what they got. A $50,000 client will say, show me your results, tell me how you're doing it, and okay, where do I send the check? When do we start?
Yeah, that you nailed it. Typically, the people that we are doing the most for and we're charging the most are the happiest. And that's hard for some people to understand, like, well, why can't you just work with me? I know that, you know, maybe it's not as much money as the other people. I go, man, in my experience, we end up doing a lot more work sometimes for a smaller client, or a client, you know, I don't want to say small, but a client that on the surface, it appears that there's less work to do, and they're not as happy. I don't know what it is.
It's just the nature of where they're at. Like, people got to the level of success that they didn't for different reasons. And Tony Robbins says everyone complains about resources. What it is a lack of resourcefulness. And ultimately, the ultimate resources are emotional states. So if I can learn to make your mind and heart a weapon, then that's why I can be an asset to anybody. It doesn't matter how good you are. The only person that I can't help are the people that have the egos and are just genuinely bad at like what they're not good at what they do. And I have, like I said, it's nothing against people that lack the skill, but I remember working with someone who they were just not good at the sport yet, and they would get pinned a lot. And I just can't teach mental skills to someone that's, no matter what they do, they need another year, you know, to be able to do that. But I know I hired a business coach when I left my company to better understand not just business, but productivity. He was phenomenal. I don't know if you ever followed his stuff. His name's Rich Webster. And Rich, he wrote a course called How to Work Less. And I was a member of his course twice. And I did 4 one-on-ones with him. Well, I guess I did 3 of the 4. And I learned so much about business and productivity. And, you know, your ideal client is your ideal client. And one of the things that he taught me is, you know, you don't make concessions for people unless they are someone that you want to work with. If you want to work with them, you will make those concessions, but you will like outline clear boundaries as to what it would be. So that's something that I've done a much better job versus, you know, on my come up, I would take anyone and everyone.
Yeah. I think we've all been there.
I realized I was wasting my 80-20, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe even doing a disservice to those people. You're doing a disservice to your top clients because you can't really devote as much attention to them. You're doing a disservice to these, less impactful clients because probably they'd be better off with the cheaper option. hey, just, go watch a few YouTube videos. Like, I probably can't help you that much. You're not going to let me in anyway.
You mentioned that. Okay, that's another thing that pisses me off is when I just posted about it too the other day, is that like, do not tell me that you have fixed your mindset issues by reading books, listening to podcasts, or watching YouTube. Because if that's the case, I want you to stop training right now. No physical training. All I want you to do is read books, listen to podcasts, and watch YouTube videos. And let me know how much you develop your skill.
Yeah. Yeah. Consuming is not going to get you where you want to be. There's got to be some sort of work involved.
Do you know the science behind learning?
I'm confident that it's not nearly as well as you.
So 5% you retain by listening, 30% you retain by watching or reading, 75% you retain by doing, 90% you retain by teaching, which is why those of us that teach classes at jiu-jitsu and things like that, we get way better. Wrestling coaches get way better. So the difference between listening to something or reading something is at a minimum almost 2.5 times less effective at a minimum than doing some sort of training. It's helpful. It's educational, but you're not going to get better tangibly, measurably, the same way that you would if you did some sort of pen to paper, curriculum driven program. Treat your mental training the same way you treat physical training, which is again, the reason why I only work with a certain group of people who see that sort of thing. The middle tier group of people, the low tier group of people, they're like, no, I'm good reading like 37 books this year. Like that's all I need.
Yeah. And there's no plan to put work into action for those folks. It's almost impossible for me to not manage money well for myself because I spend so much time, digging into it and talking with people. And so
it makes you so much better.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, teaching is like just such a superpower. If you teach something, oh my gosh, man, I understand it backwards and forwards because I understand how to explain the question that I thought couldn't even be asked.
Right.
And that's super evident in the things I've been fortunate enough to teach.
Well, that's why both of us have gotten better at our job over the years, because the more that we teach it, the better that we get at it. And then on top of that, we're probably seeking out resources to continue to enrich our own development. But I could read a bunch of business books. I can listen to Rich's course, but doing the homework and doing the one-on-one sessions, like that's where I got the results.
Yeah, actually putting in the sweat. There's no like magic pill. And I imagine every now and then, hopefully less and less as you have more and more success, but imagine people come to you thinking that you're going to, teach them a little trick, essentially, that they didn't have to earn.
Yeah.
And that's never going to work. And I get that too. People, so you probably have some investment strategy that's going to get me, there's nothing I can do. If you don't have a base level of wealth, unfortunately, we're probably not going to be able to help you. But if you do and you've demonstrated the ability.
That's why the best clients, like when they come to me, they don't assume that I'm going to solve all their problems. They understand that it's a process. They're like, I'm willing to do whatever it takes. You just let me know. That's, I think people's problem is that they don't understand like what makes a good or bad client, because they're more focused on just making money.
So something that happened to me and other wealth advisors is like, I can see someone and within a couple minutes of meeting them, I kind of know whether they really have money. I'm like, I can kind of judge based on the things you say, the things you don't say, how well you're probably doing financially.
Right.
When you observe other athletes, what are the things that show you that they have a good mindset and the things that don't? And these are people that maybe you don't even meet them, maybe you just watch them perform.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great question. Poise, their ability to not lose their ability to maintain emotional control, their ability to give and receive like critical feedback, how intentional it seems like they're being in their practices and their sparring, the effort that they put in? Are they working hard when it's convenient, or are they working hard to exhaustion every single round? And again, I don't mean that you're supposed to wear yourself out every round and drain your tank. Just effort is clear. It just has to be consistent, right? I would say people that are asking a lot of questions. So usually when I go to like a university, the best kids on the team are usually the ones raising their hands the most, because they're like, tell me whatever I need. Like, let me know what I could do. Like, how can I possibly get better? The most accomplished coach that I work with in college sports is the person who asks me hands down the most questions, who's the most vulnerable, because she just cares about getting better for her team, getting better for herself. Like, she's so hungry to learn that there's no ego between the two of us. And this is a woman that's won 11 national titles as a coach and athlete.
Yeah, there's something that gets in the way, I think, when men suffer this a lot more of like, if I ask, then it reveals that I don't know, and not knowing is a mortal sin, and I don't want to do that. So that makes sense.
They look at asking questions as looking unknowledgeable versus other people, and most women, except in groups, they see asking questions as like an opportunity to get the answer quicker. High performers see it as an opportunity to get the answer quicker. High performers are more solution efficient. They're not necessarily more talented than medium performers. They're more solution efficient. They're more focused on the things that they can control, and they're going to leverage all of the resources that they have around them so that they can control those things better. The medium level people will hold back, ask nothing, and they'll focus more so or ask very little, except when it's painful, when they have to ask something, and they'll focus mainly on things that they can't control.
Yeah. Who are some athletes that you can, and not necessarily people that you work with, but who is out there that you think, oh man, this guy's got the mindset right, or this woman's got the mindset right, and you can just tell?
It's a great question. I think like the first athlete that comes to mind is Kobe, RIP, but that guy could have written 100 books. And after he retired, that's probably the one athlete I think of a lot. Tom Brady, number 2. I know he's not playing anymore, but when I think of mental performance and the ability to be resilient, I think of Tom Brady. I think Alexander Volkanovski. I think the fact that every fight he got better and better and better and better and separated himself. And then, he gets knocked out and comes out in his post-fight being vulnerable and saying like, yeah, I see a sports psych. Like, none of us are perfect. Like, that level of lack of ego, vulnerability, he's very good. There's a high schooler. His name is Bo Bassett. He is a high school sophomore that just won a college open. And, mindset is something that's very strong for him without any formal training. It is something where there is no one that is more aggressive, has a higher pace, wants to get better, does all the things. Like, he's going to be a dream catch to whatever college that he decides to go to. I think those are the people on the outside that I think of that really showcase that. I work with a lot of people that are exceptional at this. An example that I've used a lot is Kendall Rusing. I think Kendall is just, she's a 10 out of 10 emotional intelligence. She's very, very talented. She's willing to do all the things. She was already doing a lot of these things. She has seen a guy similar like me before, but she's smart enough to recognize that there's like levels to the game. Yeah. And she recognized this, said this to me herself. Mindset is probably my strongest thing, but I want to make it a weapon, not just something I'm good at. That's what high level people think. Henry Cejudo is also another one. Henry Cejudo obsessively thinks about mindset over his career and even has his own little systems. So, those are just some of the people that really stick out to me.
And both Kendall and Henry Cejudo have to, I can tell they have a great mindset just from the BS that they have to put up with online. Like, they get hate for nothing, both of them. I mean, Henry Cejudo should be celebrated by the MMA world as, the greatest. Olympic gold medalist, 2-time, 2 weight division UFC champion. He should be the number one. And, he gets all the cringe and this and that and the other thing. And it doesn't stop him. It doesn't change him at all. Sometimes people get that hate and you can kind of see their person, even just as a fan, I can tell like, oh, it's kind of getting to them. Like they're not making the jokes like they used to. They're a little bit more reserved at the press conference, whatever. He's not. So he just owns it, which is very admirable.
Well, the reason being is because if you hang out with Henry, like I've hung out with Henry on a personal level a lot. He and Eric Alberson are the reason I worked with Whaley Figueredo, Mark Madsen, a bunch of high profile people. And Henry's the most like humble, normal, like nice guy. Like a lot of that stuff is an act. So if people want to hate on his like screen personality, he doesn't care. Another person that really sticks out to me, it's just at the tip of my tongue. Someone I was going to say that just has so much fun. Not the person that's always having fun, but who's hella smart is Sean O'Malley. I was on his podcast, and similarly, like, yeah, there's parts of his life that are all over the internet and he embraces those things and they're part of him. That dude is smart. Tim Welch is smart. If you listen to my episode and Timbo and the Sugar Show or Red Hawk Recap, both of those guys say things that like are above the pay grade of a fighter and a coach. So either they've been mentored really well or they're just really smart.
They strike me as guys that put on the opposite act. It's like, oh man, we're just dumb pot smoking guy. We're just fighting, man. No, they have it locked in.
Yeah, they are smart. I recommend anybody listen to those 2 episodes and you could see how smart both of those are and how calculated everything that they do. So yeah, I mean, I have respect for anyone that is like forward thinking and wants to get better, but those are just a handful of the guys that stand out.
So the elite MMA coaches are, I think now MMA is reached a point in sport evolution where the coaching is fun to observe on its own. 15 years ago, there was really no thrill in watching the coaching. It was, hey, go out there and just beat the guy up. And now you're starting to see like Welch and I don't remember the guy's name, but Sean Strickland's coach.
Eric Nixick. That's who I was going to suggest.
Nixick. That's right. I mean, these guys, like their insight, that's almost as enjoyable as the fight. It's just like, oh, what is he seeing?
These guys are professional coaches. Back in the day, it was just fighters that opened gyms that cornered fights.
Yeah. It was just guys who were free that Saturday.
Yeah. Or just in general, guys that weren't coaches. Like, listen, there's in Russia and Europe, if you want to coach, you have to go to 4 years of coaching school. You have to go to a university and get a degree, right? So the quality of coaches are much higher because it's like a 4-year degree. So now, we have guys that are knowledgeable, but that are mainly fighters that coach. And then you've got professional coaches where there is science, strategy. You'd be surprised how many people don't watch film, having strategic tape sparring sessions, debriefing. My buddy Chase Pammy, he runs wrestling practice at the UFC PI. He's a former NCAA finalist, runs a club out in Vegas. And he works alongside Eric for like Dan Ige, not Sean Strickland, but Cody Garbrandt. Eric's at the wrestling practices. Eric's teaching Chase striking things that Cody and Dan are going to do so he can have wrestling drills that do it. Like Francis, what he did to Cyril Gahn, and Francis, what he was able to do to Tyson Fury. Francis is Francis, but Eric is a brain that really is unique. And I have to say, if we're going to talk about Eric Nixick, I have to talk about Eric Alberson as well, who's Henry's coach. That guy is a incredible MMA genius and strategist. People don't realize he's coached, I don't know what it is. Eric, don't be mad at me. Like 15 different world champions. And he coaches the Pitbull brothers. He's coached Korean Zombie. He's coached Wei Lee. He's coached, obviously, Henry. I can't tell you however many more. But all these great coaches have things in common. Very selfless. They sacrifice their self, their life, their livelihood and things to make sure their athletes are successful. Obsessively studious as far as like game planning, optimization, making sure their guys are ready. Coaching is not what it used to be, and there's levels to this game, and they are professionals now.
Yeah, it's really fun to watch. the guys who have grown into that. And 10 years from now, I'll see what that crop of guys can continue to do. It's going to be another massive level ahead of even where we are right now, which is
because those guys are going to develop the people underneath them, so they're going to be even better.
Yeah, there's going to be coaches who learn from Nick Zick and who learn from all these Tim Welch and all these guys, which is totally new. And as an observer of the sport, it's going to be awesome. It makes me glad that I'm not a fighter, because I wouldn't want to have to fight a guy who's coached by, the Padawan of one of these guys.
Well, listen, let me tell you, one of the things that come across a lot in my early days when I was working with jiu-jitsu fighters or even like lower level MMA fighters was, well, John Danaher's in their corner, Gordon Ryan's in their corner, Greg Jackson's in their corner. I'm like, that's cool. They're well trained, but that's not who's fighting tonight. And if you were fighting Gordon Ryan, I can understand. If you were fighting John Danaher, I can understand. If you were fighting Greg Jackson, I can understand, but you're not. You're fighting a guy that's coached by them on a not world level stage, and that is just some of that is in their gym. But even if we're in a UFC title fight and they have a world-class coach, again, like, that's not who's fighting, and we can't worry about the quality of their coaching. We got to tell ourselves a story on how good our coaching was and how well prepared I was, because we're not fighting John Danaher. We're not fighting, Gordon Bryan can't bring those medals on the mat. Yeah. It's just the guy that coaches by them.
It gets me excited if I go up against a guy who's got a big name coach in his corner. I'm like, oh, okay, all right. This is more fun if I go out there and do what I do. I'm going to be happier. I want to be vulnerable with you for a second and see, you tell me if I'm wrong can I get a little free piece of advice on this?
Free lesson, go for it.
Yeah. So I have to hate the guy that I'm going against in jiu-jitsu. That's the story I've told in my head. And I will find anything wrong with this guy to like get me hyped up. And I'm sure that that's out of fear. I'm sure that that's masking some other emotion, but I still do it. It could be as stupid as, you see that guy in his first match, he pulled guard. Really? He's a guard puller? Or, so he dyed his hair blonde. Who does he think he is? Eminem? Whatever. It's stupid. It's super judgmental. It's dumb. But then I go out there and I'm like mad at them. As soon as it's over, it's cool. He's just Tony from Dallas. In competition, in business.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, in business, I have to do the same thing, or I do the same thing. Oh man, I'm going to, it's more difficult to have like a one-on-one opponent, but I still like find ways to create and manufacture enemies. And a lot of these people don't even know they're my enemy, and they're really like genuinely not, but I have to be motivated that way.
Yeah. So, I think like self-awareness is key. If that gets you consistent, sustainable results, then it works, even if it's weird. Some people want to eat tacos the night before and they win when they eat tacos. Like, whatever works for you. What I would say though, is blanket statements, anger, hate, intensity, that produces the same chemicals as stress. Your brain can't know the difference between that level of intensity. So on a broad scale, like the most dominant attitude is excitement and gratitude. Meaning, instead of maybe, and again, I'm not saying for you to change anything, but in a general scheme of things, I compete my best when I'm angry. I compete my best when I'm this. No, studies and statistics show we compete our best when we're excited. So instead of feeling like I have to hate this guy, I get an opportunity to kick his ass. Maybe it's like, get an opportunity to kick his ass. And
there you go.
So have to, get to, opportunity, obligation. When we feel like I have to do something, your brain will produce cortisol, which produces lactic acid. It produces cognitive fatigue, physical fatigue, brain fog. You get tired, and that anger and intensity, that's the MMA of past, right? Now, what do like the long-term champions do when they walk out? Like, they're smiling. Izzy's like dancing and like doing a choreographed dance. Like John Jones is lifting his arms up, just taking it all in. So what you're doing is not wrong, but if I would say like on a broader scale, instead of focusing on an unsustainable emotion like anger and hate, find where the opportunity and excitement is. So instead of I have to be angry and not like this guy, right? Like, where is the opportunity for you? So the opportunity for me to, again, you could use aggressive language. I always tell people, like, happy fighters are dangerous fighters. It's not like having fun is not hee hee ha ha. Like, I am excited to make the ref save your life today. I am excited to watch you get tired. I'm excited to hear you breathing heavy underneath me, where I know I could tap you, but I want you to think about tapping a pressure before I actually squeeze to where you lose oxygen.
Yeah. No,
take that sadistic mindset and then apply it to excitement and opportunity, because that will produce dopamine, which will allow you to not get tired. You'll be more focused and you'll enjoy it.
Being more positive instead of being negative. That's perfect.
I wouldn't say positive, negative. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of that word. More so like productive.
Yeah. Okay. It's a gratitude and excitement are much more productive than hate or envy or whatever.
Right. And when I say gratitude, like thankful for the opportunity, like where is the opportunity? Not just like, I'm thankful for God, family, friends. Like gratitude comes ultimately when in performance, when we're focused on opportunity, and when we're grateful and happy and excited, we produce dopamine instead of cortisol. And dopamine is the fatigue killer. Dopamine is the focus hormone. It's the happy hormone. When we're happy, we're allowed to think flexibly, make adjustments, versus like under intensity, similar to stress, we get tired easily. It's hard to have flexible thinking. We don't make the best decisions. So be productive in a positive manner, because positivity can get toxic really quick.
And it's not fun either when I'm over there like worried about, being mean in my heart to this guy who didn't do anything. Yeah. Like, I like winning. I like making them feel uncomfortable. I like when if they don't want to tap, that it's going to be really painful. I like making them suffer, making the opponent suffer. But I don't like having all these, I don't like the anger, really.
And that's what gets you excited. So let that gets you excited, produce your dopamine. And I'm excited for that. Not like, I have to pretend to hate you for the next 7 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. That's super helpful. Yeah. What would you say is your biggest tip to business owners, who maybe they're not fighters, they're not jiu-jitsu players? What's one thing that regular guy running a company should take away from what we've discussed?
I think what we said earlier, start with why. Most people burn out, make poor decisions, become unhappy, unfulfilled when they lose connection with their why. I would do an audit of your alignment. Why did you start this? Why did you start this, and why have you continued to do this? Right? Like, what's your why that started you, and why are you continuing to do this? Is that why still the same? That changed for me at the FBI. That's when I knew it was time to leave. Okay. Is that why connected to the things that you love, right? What do you love about about your business? Are those things still present, right? Or have you settled now, like I did, where I used to love like the content of my work. I used to love like hunting people in, national security surveillance cases, stuff like that. Now I have to settle with, well, I like my coworkers and I like my job security and I like these things. Is your why connected to your what? And do you have a clear plan on how to measure and get better at scale? Why, what, and how? So that's what I would suggest. Start with why, and, figure out beyond the surface level, what those things are. Figure out what you love about your job. Are those things still true and connected? And then you can ask yourself, what's more important? What you love and why you're doing it, or the reasons you're frustrated and the things that cause you distraction. And something that has helped my clients a lot is, instead of focusing on a million goals, ultimately when we perform, and this would be no different as a business owner, because I ask my clients, write down 3 words you would hope someone would describe you as a competitor, 3 words someone would describe you as a teammate, and then if they're a student, employee, or business owner, 3 words you would hope your employees would describe you as. So if you follow those 3 words, what that is you create an identity. Based around that identity, you create standards, and then you create identity-based habits around those standards. If you hold yourself to those standards, and those are words that are meaningful, let's take a football player. If they're relentless, reliable, and tough, 5 out of 5 on each of those. We probably played a good game. Doesn't mean that we doesn't mean that we won, but I went after every ball, wasn't afraid of anyone. I studied my film, and I was where I was supposed to be. So if a business owner can figure out with the 3 words they would hope someone would describe themselves as a boss, and how someone would describe like the culture of the business, if you hold yourself to those 3 words, everything else will take care of itself. And I'm not saying it solves all your problems, but think of those 3 words like your North Star. Like, North Star isn't going to get me home, but it tells me the general direction of where I need to go.
I'm thinking of Dan Campbell as you're talking about the 3 words. Even if we lose, if we hold to these 3 words, like when he got hired by the Detroit Lions to be their head coach, he comes out and he gives that, we're going to bite your kneecaps off speech. Everybody starts making fun of him. I was like, that's awesome. Not because they're going to bite their kneecaps off, but because at least there's a dang identity. I'm a Cowboys fan. Yeah. I want to root for a team that has an identity. They don't have to win the Super Bowl for me to have fun rooting for that team. And I want the team, I want my employees, I want my team to have an identity. And that way I know if we're succeeding, because we cannot control the outcome. We can't control whether we win or lose. We can control the inputs, right? We can control the process. Kirby Smart, coach of University of Georgia football team, says that all the time. We can't control whether we win. We can control what we can control, but ultimately we can't control the outcome. So if we're measuring our success on whether we had a 12-0 season or not, we're measuring the wrong thing, and we're going to lose sight of what's going to allow us to be 12-0 anyway.
100%. And everyone sets goals and expectations that we can't control, that we're living up to for the wrong reasons. Instead, we need to create an identity and then create standards. And then we don't negotiate with the standard. And then we measure the standard. You have tangible data points that if you set those 3 words, examples of those, you should be able to collect data on a daily or weekly basis through journaling or internal or external assessment to where you can see yourself moving the needle.
Yeah. One thing that standing out to me is what we measure can never be the why. And that's what it sounds like you're saying is whatever it is that you measure can't be the why, but whatever is your why has to have something that is measurable.
Your why has to be bigger than you and not connected to outcomes or money or results. So for a lot of people, faith is the biggest mental edge, because when God is first, their sport is not, their business is not. And without faith, then what it has to be is it has to be something bigger than you, not connected to outcomes, ego, or other people. And when you find what that why is, then it's very easy for you to figure out how to overcome adversity, especially if you have a plan to consistently get better. Because even if I'm not ready to figure it out now, like my trajectory is going to allow me. So it's not that I can't figure it out, it's I haven't figured it out yet.
Yeah. Thanks for being here, Mike. I appreciate all of your insights, and I know our listeners do too. Where can people connect with you and learn more about the work that you do?
For sure. So I'm finishing the guts of building the official website, but you can go to unfairadvantagemindset.com just to get a little sneak peek. Where most people find me is Instagram, mindset_Mike, not hard to find. And if you're interested in any sort of work, whether it's, one-on-one executive coaching, so somebody in sports is on here, or you'd like me to bring me in to help you build culture for your business, I do that very often. And I would be happy to respond at any or all the above. So unfairadvantagemindset.com just gives you a preview. Okay. Best ways to contact me is Instagram, or my phone number and email is also attached to that as well. So DM me, email me, Mike@unfairadvantagemindset.com, or you can find my phone number if you're bold enough to call me.
Cool. Thanks, Mike. My takeaways from talking to Mike are several. One, start with why. We've talked about it so many times on the podcast. It's in my book. I cannot get enough of that. So when it's validated by someone with the expertise and credibility that Mike has, it makes me even more confident that the why is important, it's vital, and it's often overlooked. The second is positive and productive emotions like excitement and gratitude are a lot more motivating than fear, anxiety, or avoidance. And if I could reframe that, it's about going to, not going away. So the same mindset that allows for a successful and fulfilling retirement, allows for a successful and fulfilling everything else. In the example that we used, it was my jiu-jitsu matches. So I don't want to run away from something. I want to run toward something. So if I'm angry, if I'm fearful, if I'm hateful, I'm running away from something. If I'm thankful, excited, gracious, grateful, I'm running to something. Those are my two big takeaways.
You just made a great decision to listen to this episode of Decidedly. Make another great decision and leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. We appreciate your support. It helps others find our community and defeat bad decision-making in their own lives. For more daily decision-making insights, check us out at decidedlypodcast.com and on Facebook and Instagram at Decidedly Podcast. Thanks again for listening. I'm Sanger Smith, and this is Decidedly.
Insights, advice, and comments provided by Sean Smith, Sanger Smith, and speakers identified as part of the Decidedly podcast should not be considered recommendations. Speakers not identified as members of Decidedly are expressing their opinion, and their statements should not be construed as reflecting the views of the Decidedly team. This podcast is produced solely for informational purposes, not personalized advice.